Hello and a very good day. My name is Abhilash and I am from the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine, and I would be your presenter for today. Now, before we actually go ahead and jump in and get started, I would like to thank you all for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time today, and thank you for being a part of today's webinar. For those of you who are new to my webinar, thank you so much for joining in. And for those of you who are my old attendees, it's so nice to see you all again today. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody out here today is able to hear me and is able to see the screen well. So I'll just start off with a quick audio and a video check. I'll just start off with a quick audio check first because I want to make sure that my voice is reaching to you well and clear. So if my voice is reaching to you well and clear, please use the chat box in front of you to say yes, okay, great, anything using which I can confirm that my voice is reaching to you well and clear without any distortion. Just a confirmation from you can help me. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you so much, Jerry. Now, if you can see the screen, if you can see the title, my name, and my email ID, just punch in yes via the chat box again. That's great. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you so much, Jerry. All right, perfect. Now, before I jump into today's agenda and show you what's in store for us today, I would like to tell you that the entire session is being recorded, and the recording along with the slide deck would be sent to you post the webinar. So if you've got any questions during the course of the webinar, please keep them coming via the chat box. And I promise you that I will take the questions, I will take the answers towards the end of the session. And even if I miss taking your questions, please do not worry. I will definitely get back to you with a detailed email with answers for all of your questions. So if you've got any questions, you can always keep them coming via chat and I will take them post the webinar. So today's webinar's title is 10 events you should audit in hybrid Active Directory to prevent a breach. Now, why did I choose to speak about this topic today? And what are the 10 events that we would be discussing in today's webinar? The reason I chose to speak about this topic today is to shed light on 3 important factors when it comes to security. Number 1 is that anybody can be an attacker and anyone can be subject to an attack. Now, this might sound like a cliched line, but the major mistake we do, or most organizations do, is we often turn a blind eye towards attacks. Because we believe that attacks never happen to us, right? We believe that attacks only happen to the top-notch celebrity companies, but the truth is, any organization, especially the small and the medium-sized organizations as well, are subject to attack, and we need to be prepared at all times. Point number 2 is that technical knowledge is not a must-have to be an attacker. That's right, technical knowledge or technical expertise is not needed to be an attacker. We often imagine an attacker to be a hooded figure crouched behind a laptop with meticulous coding skills and technical expertise. But the truth is, anybody can be an attacker. All an attacker needs is some internet and an opportunity. And finally, with the right tools and know-how, knowing where to look when and where can help us fend ourselves against such attacks, can help us protect our organization against such security breaches. So yes, what do we have in today's agenda? We will take a look at 10 events or 10 activities in hybrid Active Directory that can lead to a breach. So these are going to be 10 hands-on experiments. We will see 10 live demonstrations, and we will also see how failing to audit such events can lead to a full-scale security breach. In the second part of today's webinar, we will learn to detect the events using the native solutions or native auditing, and we will also try and see a few limitations around native auditing. And finally, we will learn to detect and solve such events by detecting and alerting with AD Audit Plus. So bear with me, today's 10 experiments are going to take you on a fun ride. You will see a lot of things, a lot of live demonstrations. So I apologize in advance if it gets a little bit too technical, but I assure you that this today is going to be fun, and the entire recording would be sent to you again. So if you could sit back and watch through the attacks one by one, I'm sure there is something useful that you can take away from this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. The first attack we have is a classic brute force attack. Now, why did I pick the brute force attack? Brute force attack is the oldest trick in the book, right? So why am I talking about a brute force attack today? The reason I picked this attack is because in 2019, most attacks, most breaches that were recorded were brute force and replay attacks. So potentially attackers brute force an admin or a privileged user's credentials, and once an attacker has obtained the admin's credentials, the attacker would then reuse the credentials across multiple nodes within the organization's network. So this is how this attack is going to pan out, right? I will log in as an end user, that's right, an internal user, an authenticated user with absolutely no privileges, right? Just a standard domain user logging on to his domain join system. And then I will perform reconnaissance, or I will enumerate for critical information, right? For instance, finding the names of domain controllers to perform the brute force attack, finding out the password policy to create passwords for the brute force attack, or finding out members of security groups. Post which, I will brute force a list of 60 to 70 passwords. Now, these 50 to 70 passwords, I have picked it from Daniel Messier's checklists. For those of you who do not know Daniel Messier, he is a research analyst who has found out about 10 million weak passwords. So I picked the best passwords from that list in order to perform the brute force today. But if you are testing it in your environment, I would encourage you to pick all the 10 million passwords. And then the end result of this attack is going to be access to the administrator's account. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin the attack. So this is my VM, right? So before I get started with the attack, let me quickly show you something. You can see that I've logged in as a user called James. Right now, if I quickly key in this command called netuserjames, you will see that James is not a privileged user of any kind or an administrator, because these are the group memberships that we have, right? Remote desktop users, domain users, and IT support. So Active Directory tells me that James is just a regular domain user. So let me quickly clear this and show you something. So this is the script that I would be using to perform the brute force attack. Now, I got the script from the internet, and I got it modified a bit from our developers in our team to get this attack to work. All right, so it's pretty straightforward here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the attribute, in this case username, and I will add in the administrator's name right here. All right, and I have the domain controller's name right here. Now, how did I get the domain controller's name? And how did I get the administrator's name? Because not every organization names their administrator as administrator. For example, Brad could be an administrator with the SID 500, right? And not every end user generally knows the domain controller's name. This is not a normal thing. So how do we find out details such as the admin's name or the domain controller's name? In order to do that, I will perform reconnaissance, right? So first, the domain controller's name. Once I open up PowerShell, all I will do is run a command called get AD domain controller. It's pretty straightforward, right? And here we have the domain controller's details right in front of us. What's next? Find out the usernames. So I will open up my command prompt, and I will run a command called WMIC user account get name comma SID. And once I click enter, what's going to happen is every user account within the domain along with their respective SID is going to be pushed out at the display of the command prompt. Now this will take a while because I have thousands of users, but eventually that's what the command will do. So I have the administrator user with the SID 500, and I have the domain controller's name as well. I have everything I need for the attack, but the one last thing that I would need is a list of passwords. Right, so I have top 100 passwords.txt. This is just a text file. that I have right here, where I've put in about 40 to 50 passwords. Now, how do I run this attack? It looks pretty complex, right? All I have to do is simply copy the script, open up PowerShell again, clear this, and I will paste the script. And once I click enter, you can now see that the brute force attack has started. So we're trying the first password right here. And let's just give this a second for it to run through all the passwords. And meanwhile, let me show you something. All right, perfect. Here we are. So all the passwords have been run, and we have found the administrator's password, which happens to be Hyper-V at 123, and we've tried about 43 passwords. This was a pretty straightforward attack, right? We just took a list of passwords, we targeted the admin account, and we have the admin's plaintext password right in front of us. And I would like to reiterate on the fact that this attack was performed by a user with absolutely no privileges. Now, before I get to detecting the attack, I want to ask you a simple question. Right now, we all know that there is something called a lockout threshold or a lockout time in an organization, where if multiple invalid attempts are made on an account, the account would get logged out. Therefore, a user cannot log on to that account anymore. But in this case, like we saw it, we tried 43 passwords on the account, right? But why didn't the administrator get logged out? The reason this happened is because the administrator account in Active Directory does not have a lockout policy. That's right, the lockout threshold that you set, it could be 2, it could be 10. No matter what you set the lockout threshold to be, the administrator's account will stay unaffected. So how do we go about detecting brute force attacks? Right now, we saw that the admin account is the most favorable for brute force attacks, and coincidentally, the admin account is also the most powerful account. So in order to detect it, we have a few options in native auditing. That's right, we go ahead and we look into the event viewer and security logs. But the problem is there are numerous logon events generated, right? There are remote logons, there are interactive logons, and there are network logons, and it's extremely difficult to search and filter brute force attempts that are being made on a particular account. Active Directory cannot alert on malicious script usage. That's right, Active Directory can alert on script usage, but it cannot alert on malicious script usage. Now, what do I mean by script usage right here? So if I quickly minimize this, open up my GP edit. Now this would be the group policy on your domain controller potentially. Head into computer configuration, administrative templates, and Windows components and Windows PowerShell right here. So do you see these options right here? Module logging and script block logging. This will let you audit PowerShell scripts that are being run within your organization. Right, so module logging logs particular modules, and script block logging logs the code blocks, right, or the function blocks within a script. Now, what do I call a function block as? So this is a function block. For example, do you see this right here? Function get services. Everything within the curly brackets is a function block, and script block logging helps you to detect such functions. So detecting scripts is possible within Active Directory, but there is no way you can detect malicious scripts. There is no filtered search. You can't find out which user has run what script, and you cannot obviously dig down and find out the script data. And finally, there is no threshold-based alerts in Active Directory. For instance, if there has been a logon attempt on an account, right, 10 times in 2 minutes, that's a potential threat, but Active Directory does not alert you on such activities. So how do we alert on brute force activities within AD Audit Plus? So if I quickly head back into AD Audit Plus and jump into reports, right, you have something called logon failures right here, or failures due to bad password. Right now, let me quickly select my domain right here And let me go ahead and say, let's say yesterday, or let me actually select a custom range, right? This is possible with an AD Audit Plus as well. So let's say I want to detect all failures from Feb 1st to March 31st. And once I click apply, here we have the failures right in front of us. So Luna account has been tried to log in 8 times, right? And check out the timing. Everything is within the same second, right? 10 minutes, 58 seconds, 10 minutes, 58 seconds, 10:58. So when you find events like this is a potential threat, and these have to be alerted upon. Similarly, if I head into server audit, we have something called PowerShell auditing right here. So the GPO settings that we just enabled right here will take effect here. But the good thing about AD Audit Plus is that it can track specific modules and script blocks. All right, for instance, these are the commands run in the last 24 hours. And if I head into script block logging and go ahead and select, let's say, again, a custom range, let me go ahead and select everything from Jan 1st, 2020 to Feb 29. And if I click apply, here we go. Right, these are the accounts that have run particular scripts. So if I click on details, we can find out the script data, meaning what scripts have been run by which account, and we have a bird's eye view of the account names right in front of us, right here in the form of a graph. All right, now if I head into configuration and head into create alert profile. Right, so you could potentially create the alert profile that you want. For instance, I can head here and scroll down and select PowerShell audit. All right, and I can select the alert that I want. For instance, threshold-based alerts. This could be useful for the logon failures report. If there are 10 logons in 5 minutes, then email the admin or SMS the admin or execute a script that will do something. For instance, disable the user who's been trying to do the account lockout or who's been trying multiple invalid logon attempts. We could potentially filter and set customized alerts as well. For instance, if I go ahead and click add filter, I can select the script data, right? So I can put in malicious script data right here, and whenever malicious scripts are run, I would be alerted instantly via email, via SMS, or on the AD Audit Plus dashboard right here. So that is my first attack, brute force attack on the administrator's account. What do we have next? We have anonymous access in Active Directory. Now, for those of you who do not know what anonymous access is, this is access without credentials or without a password. That's right, your users can potentially log into Active Directory or network access any file without keying in the password. The event viewer would record these accesses as anonymous, and the object GUID, right, would be 0000. So there is no way you can determine which user actually logged on as an anonymous user. And there are GPO options like let everyone permissions apply to anonymous users, using which anonymous users can gain access to the critical parts of your network. So how do we track this? AD Audit Plus can help you track this because we have this group, right, called the pre-Windows 2000 compatible access group. Now, I would advise you to go back and check this group. Now, whenever everyone is a member of this group, right, the everyone user principal is a member of this group, anonymous access is triggered. That way, users can log on anytime without giving in credentials, hiding their access, and access anything they want. And AD Audit Plus can also help you audit GPO options real time. For instance, let everyone permissions apply to anonymous users. So what happens here is wherever everyone has permissions, right, with an Active Directory, the anonymous user permission would then take effect there. Real-time group monitoring whenever there's a group membership change, or real-time GPO monitoring whenever there's a GPO change, AD Audit Plus alerts the administrator. You can, of course, set customized alerts as well, and this is something native Active Directory cannot do. The third attack, account lockouts. Now, all of us would have faced this at some point in time, right? We get account lockouts day in and day out, but there is this one employee who often complains about his or her account getting locked out. They call you up, they're like, hey, sysadmin, my account got locked out. What do I do now? So you unlock the account, and within 5 minutes, there is the employee with his or her laptop and saying, hey, my account got locked out again, and I don't really know why. Now, instead of simply unlocking the account, I would advise you to go down and find out why the account got locked out. It could be for multiple reasons, right? It could be map network drives using the stale credentials or the older password. It could be a service account that is using the older password. It could be a process that is using the older password. No matter what the reason behind the lockout is, it is imperative for an administrator or a help desk technician to know why the account got locked out. Because for all you know, the account lockout could be a potential brute force attempt. Because unlike the admin account, general users in Active Directory have a lockout policy, right? They will get locked out when multiple invalid attempts are tried. So in order to detect account lockouts, right, we spent quite a bit of time on this, and we have something. If I head into reports right here, and if I potentially scroll down, right under user management, right, we have something called account lockout analyzer. So you can see that I have a user called Hasi whose account has been locked out multiple times, right, at around the same time again and again. So if I click details right here, this will help you drill down and find out why the account is getting locked out in the first place. This can help in two ways. You can fix the error, and two, you can be sure that it's not a brute force or a password spray attempt. For instance, Windows services use the credentials here. There is a map drive that uses the credentials, and there are about 6 to 7 processes that use the credential. Right? We also have OWA and ActiveSync. Now, these are third-party platforms that potentially may be using the older credentials. So using account lockout analyzer, you can find out the reason behind the account lockout, thus solving the problem, but also eliminating the possibility of a brute force attack. Like I said, there are multiple ways accounts can get locked out, and this is just an image showcasing that. Point number 4, surveying the domain for vulnerabilities. Now, what do I mean by this? If you remember in the brute force attack, the first thing that we did was to enumerate data, right? Or to perform reconnaissance, where we found the domain controller's name and we found different usernames using which we were able to perform the brute force attack. So the first step in most cyber attacks is to perform reconnaissance or to enumerate data in the domain. If we can catch the enumeration attempt or the recon attempt at the start, we could prevent the possibility of a full-scale security breach. For example, commands such as this, right? Get AD domain controller. We did that to get the domain controller's name. Get AD default domain password policy. This will give in the password policy of the domain. Get AD group filter and get AD group identity server operators. So all of these commands can help you obtain critical information from Active Directory, such as members of administrative groups, or the password policy, or the number of Exchange servers on your domain to perform an Exchange server-based attack. And if we can catch that at such attempts at the start, we could prevent the possibility of a breach. And I would like to reiterate here that all recon commands can be run by your end users. That's right, your users with absolutely no privilege. So if a user turns rogue, or if an attacker captures a user's account, he or she can instantly query for information. Unfortunately, that's how Active Directory is designed or built. So in order to catch domain recon attempts, all we have to do is head into AD Audit Plus, and we have something. If I head into reports right here and server audit, we have something called LDAP auditing right here. If I click on LDAP queries, right, and if I select the domain, let's say this, you can now see different users and the LDAP commands they are running. In this case, the user James, right here, has run 28 LDAP queries. Now, James is just a standard user. What business does James have running LDAP queries? So if I quickly search for James and I click enter, here we go. These are all James's attempts, right? Within the same time, and James has run multiple queries. And here is the filter string, the queries that have been run by James. This is something that must be audited to cut off cyber attacks at the start, to nip the problem in the bud. Right? As always, you can head into configuration, set up alerts for recon attempts, and you would be alerted immediately. As you can see here, I have set up an alert for LDAP recon activity. Right? I can head down and set up an alert. Let's say threshold-based alerts. More than 10 enumeration attempts within 2 minutes, please alert the administrator or the help desk technician, and also execute a script to disable that user who's performing the recon attempt. Right? Similarly, we can head down into filter and we can filter specific malicious queries as well. Right? For instance, if I put in filter string right here, here we go. All we have to do is simply type in the query right here, which is going to be object class is equal to any query, user or group, and we can find out if malicious attempts are being made using LDAP queries or enumeration attempts are being run within the organization's internal network. Right. What do we have next? We have privilege escalation and persistence with groups. Now, I don't want to get into the explanation, but let me just show you the attack live. All right, so I will quickly head on to my VM here again, and you can see that I have a script here called power up. All right, so let me quickly clear this up and run a command called PowerShell.exe-exec and then bypass. So the reason I'm running this command is because Microsoft or PowerShell by default does not let you run scripts that are not from authorized sources or that are not verified by Microsoft. So this command can be run by any user. I repeat, any privileged user, and now the user has the ability to run any malicious script, no matter what the source is. All right, so I'll quickly head to the desktop right here, and I will type in the command called import module /powerup.ps1. Now that the module is imported, all I have to do is run a command called invoke all checks. And once I click enter, right, what's going to happen now is the PowerUp tool or the PowerShell script is going to check for any privilege that James have, any possibility for privilege escalation. For instance, unattended install files that may have James's privilege credentials, or nested group memberships, or GPO options that may have given James administrative privilege. Right now, once that's done, I will run a command called write user add MSI. And once I click enter, here's what's going to happen. Right? So once this command finishes running, you can see that .msi written to user add.msi. There will be an MSI application on the desktop right here. So let me quickly open up the application. And now you can see that I have a GUI to add a backdoor user to any group in Active Directory that I wish. Could be an administrator group, a domain admins group, or for instance, a group that has read access on the LAPS password, right? The local administrator password solution that is deployed within the organization. So let me call my user backdoor_attack, right? And let me key in the password. It's going to be password at 123. Why do we care about password strength for a backdoor user, right? And once I click create, let me quickly show you something. This is PowerShell again. I will clear this and I will run a command called net local group administrators. And you can now see that backdoor_attacker1 is a member of the administrators group. Pretty straightforward. Right now I have a backdoor user's account. I will log into Active Directory and I can gain whatever control that I wish. Now you might immediately ask me a question, right? It's not normal for a user to simply install an MSI application and add a backdoor user. There is some kind of privilege that is required here. But if you can recollect, when we run the net user James command, Active Directory told me that James is not a privileged user of any kind. So how did this happen? Here are two ways the privilege escalation has happened. All right, if I quickly head into reports, and if I scroll down, you can see that I have something called group management right here. And if I head into recently added members of security groups, right? And if I select my domain right here we go. You can now see that there is a group called IT support, right? And James was added to the IT support group, right? And server managers, there is another group called server managers that IT support is a member of. And server managers in turn is a member of domain administrators in Active Directory. So I'm pretty sure it's clear to you now, right? Via nested memberships, right? James was never a direct member of domain admins, but James was a member of IT support. And via nested memberships, James happened to be an administrator. But all the while, we were under the impression that James is just a standard user, a user with no privileges at all. So AD Audit Plus can help you track privilege escalation such as this, and also group additions. Here we go. We have a backdoor underscore ABI user that was added. Right. So monitoring privileged groups for memberships and also nested memberships is absolutely important, and AD Audit Plus can help you do that. Now, there is another way the privilege could have been escalated. For instance, if I head into GPO settings changes and head into administrative template changes, right, you can now see that there has been a change in the default domain policy on Feb 10th. If I go ahead and see show details, you can see that this option, always install elevated privileges, has been enabled, right? So in a nutshell, what this option does is it gives your end user the ability to run any MSI application or a Windows installer application with the local administrator credentials. That's right, the local administrator credentials, and you can do anything you wish with Active Directory. In this case, add a backdoor user to any administrative group. So these are two ways James was able to install and run the MSI application, thereby adding the admin user. But there are thousands of ways privilege escalation can happen. For instance, deployment credentials that are there in unattended install files, right? Now, AD Audit Plus can help you detect all of those attempts. For instance, we have group detection right here, like we just saw. Additions to the group are detected in real time, and also GPO settings changes can be detected real time. And I repeat, these are just two ways privilege escalation can happen with an Active Directory. Next up, we've got elevated privileges with Exchange. Now, groups, monitoring groups, right? Privileged groups in Active Directory and nested memberships is important, but you also need to monitor your cross-domain groups, your groups on your other DCs and your other platforms as well. Because here is an example. There is a little loved but forgotten group called Exchange Windows Permissions. So what does the group do, right? So let me quickly head on to my VM right here and open up the ADUC tool. I'm pretty sure all of you have seen this, the glorified tool that we use all the time. And here we have the domain node, right? This is the domain object node, or the domain DNS node to be more precise. If I right click on it, head into properties and head into security, right? So these are permissions. And let me tell you that any permission change here will reflect on every object under the domain. And any member of the Exchange Windows Permissions group in Exchange, right, can modify permissions on the domain node. For instance, if a user just comes in and gives himself write and read access over the domain, he gets it because the user eventually has privilege via Exchange Windows Permissions group. Right? So monitoring cross-platform groups and cross-domain groups is also important, and AD Audit Plus can help you do that. Monitor cross-platform groups and alert the administrator instantly with the customized alerts option that you have. Next up, we've got invisible users and groups in Active Directory. Now, what are invisible users? Right? Attackers have upped their game now. They do not use regular users or groups to perform attacks, but they use something called invisible groups, or in more technical terms, dynamic groups within Active Directory. Now, dynamic groups are groups that have an entry TTL, that have an expiration time, right? So when the time gets over, these groups are removed from Active Directory without leaving a trace within native Windows auditing. So dynamic groups, like every tool introduced, were introduced to benefit the organization. In this case, to reduce the administrative overhead of adding and removing members from security groups, so the entire process could be automated. But eventually, this option was misused, right? Just like how PowerShell was misused by attackers. Tools often introduced for the good of the organization are abused and misused, and this is just one example. An attacker can simply add himself for a specific period of time and vanish from Active Directory without leaving a trace in the Windows native auditing. And the same logic goes for dynamic groups as well. So the problem with native auditing here is that there are lots and lots of logs for user and group creation. We know that already, right? Lots and lots of users and groups are created day by day, and checking each log is very cumbersome. And this only gets more difficult because the logs are not any different for dynamic users or dynamic groups. They just look like regular users and groups, right? And finally, like I said, upon expiration, these groups just vanish from Active Directory without a trace, without leaving back an event. So AD Audit Plus can help you track invisible groups and users or dynamic users and groups with a special attribute called the entry TTL. So the entry TTL holds the seconds or the time the group is going to be alive for, right? So AD Audit Plus can track any object, in this case a user or a group. If it is created with an entry TTL, AD Audit Plus would instantly alert the administrator because that could be a potential attack attempt, a stealthy attack attempt to be more precise. Next up, we've got a spray and a replay attack. Now, without getting into further details, let me quickly show you the attack. So this is my VM right here, right? And you can see that I have a script here called domain password spray. So let me quickly open up PowerShell and head to the desktop and run the bypass command again. Again, this command will enable me as an end user to run any malicious script from Active Directory, right? And I will run import module /domain password spray .ps1, and now invoke domain password spray, right? And password, which is going to be password at 123, and once I click OK, you can now see that the password spray has started. And once I click confirm or Y, here we go. We've got 4 users with a weak password, like password at 123, and here we have our backdoor users as well. Now this is a slightly advanced version of a brute force attack, and this script is really smart. The reason I say that is because there is a 30-minute wait between sprays. For instance, if user A is sprayed with a password, user A would only be sprayed again after 30 minutes. This is by purpose, this is by design, because if the lockout time is 30 minutes within the organization, the user accounts lockout, the bad logon pathing would be reset, right? The lockout threshold, would be reset to 0. So when there is a 30-minute wait between user A and user B, the lockout threshold would be reset post 30 minutes. Now you might ask me a question, how can you decide that 30 minutes is the time for the lockout counter to be reset, right? I can do that by simply running a command called get AD default domain password policy. If you can recollect, I spoke about this when I spoke about the reconnaissance attempt, right? So by using this command, I can find out the password policy of the domain and I can set to wait between sprays. So this way, no account gets locked out despite being sprayed on multiple times, and I, as an attacker, can remain invisible within the organization, only based on the sole reason that the lockout counter will get reset post 30 minutes. So how do we detect that? How do we detect spray in Active Directory? So if I head into AD Audit Plus, right here, the first thing that I would like for you to do is head into Server Audit. Now I implore you to go ahead and set up PowerShell auditing. This is 2019 and scripts have gotten really advanced, right? So all you have to do is simply head into the setting like I told you within the GPOs, and if you don't see them, then update your GPOs or update your server OS, and I'm pretty sure you can find them. So PowerShell auditing, script block auditing, using which you can detect certain scripts that are being run, the function blocks within the script, and also module auditing, using which you can detect modules, right? For instance, James here has run 277 scripts, and you can go ahead and read what is within the script. So if there is potentially anything malicious or harmful, you can immediately disable the user and you can take instant action. Right, that would be the 8th attack, a domain password spray and a replay attack. And just to make sure that this attack can be made on your Office 365 as well. That's right, on your Azure AD as well. Next up, we've got password hashes with replication permissions. Now, what does this attack do, right? So let me quickly show you something. This is my VM right here, and you can see that I've logged in as a user called Luna, right? I've logged in as a user called Luna, and I have Mimikatz installed right here. Now, Mimikatz is a tool that all of you, I'm sure, know of. This is freely available over the internet. Just quickly download the tool, right? Copy the path right here and paste it. Right? Now, I would want you to shift to this directory. Now, you might immediately ask me, Mimikatz is a popular tool, right? It's blocked by all organizations. But there is a command that can help you bypass Windows Defender as well, right? That can be done on PowerShell as well. So this is what helps you shift to the Mimikatz directory. And if I run /mimikatz.exe, right, and I click enter, you can see that Mimikatz has now started. And all I have to do now is run a command called lsa dump DC sync, right, domain, which is wsmbde.com. That's the name of my domain, and user who happens to be an administrator. And once I click enter, you can now see that I have the administrator's password hash right in front of me. Now I can simply copy that hash, right? Just right click and copy, and I could use the hash and pass the hash attacks, or I'll simply head onto my browser, open up a tool called crackstation.net, right? So what's going to happen here is this tool is going to take this hash and potentially run it against various databases of hashes to get the equivalent plaintext password. And once I check this box saying I am not a robot, wow, let me just confirm that I am actually not a robot, but just an attacker. All right, here we go. Verify. Here we go, great. So once I click crack hashes, right, we have the hash here and the admin's plaintext password right in front of us. That's how simple it is to get a password of a privileged user. But how did this attack happen? Right now, let me quickly show you something again. If I head onto my DC, right, open up the DSA or the Active Directory users and computers, right click, properties, head into security, all the way down into replicating directory changes and replicating directory changes all. Right now, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that these two permissions here gave my end user the ability to get the password hashes of a privileged or admin or any user that they wish. How did this happen? There could be multiple reasons. One reason that springs to my mind is the Exchange Windows Permissions group. If you can recollect, that group gives your user the ability to modify permissions right here. So that's one good possibility. The user was able to give himself or another user replicating directory changes permissions. So replicating directory changes are potentially used between domain controllers to update their changes between themselves, and not just domain controllers, but also third-party applications such as Forefront Identity Manager or SharePoint to update their own database to that of Active Directory's database. That's what replication permissions are used for, right? But generally, these permissions are given to trusted or admin users. But in this case, an attacker or a malicious user had this permission, and he or she was able to get the admin's or any user's password hash. And the hash was cracked offline to get the plain text password. So how do we detect this attack using native auditing? The problem with native auditing is that it cannot monitor the domain or node, right? The domain object within ADUC tool for real-time changes. And groups such as admins or enterprise admins also have this privilege, so they must be monitored real time as well. So AD Audit Plus can help you do that. If I quickly jump into AD Audit Plus and head into reports. If I scroll all the way down, we have something called domain object changes right here. So if I click on domain level permission changes, right, you can see that James's permissions have been changed. And when I click more right here, you can see that James has been given read permissions and stuff, but James has also been given replicating directory changes permissions. And this is something that has to be alerted, right? And alerts, like always, can be built within the configuration profile, and the admin can be alerted via email, SMS, and also a remedial action, right? Such as execute a script that disables the user can take place. Last but not the least, we've got detecting anomalies with user behavior changes. So this is UBA, right? User behavior changes. Cyber attacks have gotten really advanced, like we saw just now, right? And it's important to read in to the user's behavior pattern. For instance, does your user actually log in post business hours or after business hours? Is there an unusual amount of management activity such as user creation, deletion, or group membership changes happening? Was a host or a member server touched by a first time by an end user? Did a user log on for the first time? Were many files deleted or created or moved or renamed? Activities such as this must be detected, and AD Audit Plus can help you do that with analytics right here. So analytics can help your administrators or your help desks to detect on unusual user activity by reading into the user's behavior. In this case, unusual activity summary by user, or weird logon activities that were performed by user. For instance, unusual logon failures on a particular host. The same goes to files, where a number of file accesses were failed, or a number of files were accessed, or there were a huge amount of files that were deleted by an attacker. Right, so these analytics, the analytics tab right here, can help you read into user behavioral changes. Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is just the start, right? Now, the reason I showed you all of these attacks today is to show you the seriousness of today's cyber attack landscape. That it's pretty easy to perform an attack, right? You don't need privileges. All you need is just some internet and some motivation. This is just the start. We've just touched the surface of attacks. And if you wish to see deeper, I have prepared a deck called There's More Than One Way to Get Admin Privileges. It's on our LinkedIn handle, and this is the link to access it. I will put the link on chat post the webinar. And if you wish to see this deck, you will learn about different ways attackers and malicious insiders can obtain admin privileges with an Active Directory. Now, before I end today's webinar, I will be pushing out 2 polls, right? Just 2 questions for you, and it would be great if you could answer these questions for me. Right, this is just for our internal team that I was asked to do. So if you could just select an option when the question flashes across your screen, that would be really, really helpful. So here we go, right? You will see the first question flash across your screen, and if you could punch in the answer for me, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much for your responses. That's great. I'll just close the first poll and open up another poll. Here we go. Just the last question, and I promise I will be out of your hair. Thank you so much for your responses, guys. So that's great. Thank you so much. Now, I hope you found this webinar informative. I hope you got the chance to understand all the attacks. I understand that there was a lot of material to cover just within 45 to 50 minutes. But to help you out, the recording would be passed on to you. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your feedback. And if you wish to find out any more information about AD Audit Plus or about the attacks that we performed today, I would be more than happy to help you out. Now, I will be here for the next 10 to 15 minutes. So if you've got any questions, you can use the chat box in front of you to ask me the questions. And if you get questions later on, or if I miss answering your questions, please do not worry. I will get back to you via email very, very soon. And if you wish to ask me questions later in the day, you always have my email ID right in front of you. That's abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com. Just drop me an email anytime, and I would be more than happy to help you. So yes, I would be here for the next 10 to 15 minutes. If you have any questions, please keep them coming in via chat box. I would be muting myself now. So I would like to thank you all for joining in again. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day ahead. I would be here. I will mute myself, and if you have any questions, please keep them coming. Thank you.